Every day, countless dogs are subjected to electronic shock and prong collars under the guise of better control and more reliable behavior. The following are real-world experiences by people, both dog professionals and dog owners, who have experienced the tragic behavioral fallouts and physical damage from dogs being subjected to shock and prong collars. So what has been the fallouts from using shock collars on your dogs?
He is so afraid of beeping, the beeping tone that is in nearly every electronic piece of equipment in our house.
So what's been the common behavioral fallout from the use of shock and prong collars that you've witnessed?
Quite often, it was very obvious to us upon intake which of these dogs had had shock collars and prong collars used on them, because there would be physical marks, visible damage done to them. So the first thing that we would see was actual health effects. Prong collars, we would see dogs come in with puncture wounds on their neck. The shock collars, we would often see dogs that had burn spots on their neck. They would associate being around either people or stressful situations or other dogs with pain. And so that would cause their behavior to escalate very quickly. And so we took in this dog named Padme. We had information from their intake evaluation that said that when she was surrendered to the shelter, she had a prong collar and a shock collar on her neck when they dropped her off, as well as puncture wounds and burn marks from those tools. Because she recognized a small handheld device with an antenna and associated that with the handheld button from her shock collar, and she would attack the walkie-talkies. And unfortunately, the damage to her ability to trust situations was so bad that she was put down.
I mean, it's everything from physical evidence. I mean, you can see harm to the neck. Certainly, I've seen that before. You can see physical, fidgetiness and anxiety. But in the greater scheme of things, certainly behaviorally, dogs that basically look like they've been walking on eggshells all the time and worried about, is this tool going to stop me or have an effect on me? And so dogs that lack confidence, dogs who struggle to calm down.
So in your experience working with dogs, what have you seen as some of the behavioral fallouts from dogs who are subjected to shock collars and choke collars and so forth?
Yeah, I see a tremendous amount of dog-directed aggressive behavior, agonistic behavior, threat displays. I see at the store a lot of people come in with larger breeds like Dobermans, German Shepherds, that kind of thing, and they have them on a shock collar. And as they go past another dog, they just dissolve. They fall apart completely, and the person's holding them back, freaking out, wondering why that's happening.
So in those contexts, are you seeing that dog being shocked and he's reacting?
I think it's a combination of that and the response to that other dog. If I'm the dog, I'm reactive, and I get shocked every time I see another dog. I see another dog and expect that shock.
It kind of felt like you were being groomed. It was like this real slow progression of like, see, oh, your dog's trying to back up. They're being bossy. We want them to come when you click it, and then you give them a reward. And I watched the video yesterday of our first training session and just cried, because now I know. And what I could see in his body language was that he didn't want the pain, but he wanted the food, which tells me now that I know he would have done whatever needed to be done for the food reward. I was told that that was kind of impossible. He was being a bossy puppy, needed to be put in his place. And there were so many red flags. The trainer said, oh, I don't even have to click it anymore. I just tell my dogs, come, and their head tilts without the collar on. And these kind of reactions, you think they're a red flag, but you're saying, well, this is a professional. I had no idea that this was an unregulated profession. And I did such a disservice to my dog. And it's taken a little over a year to correct just the fallout. I didn't understand that dogs don't just think like we do. I was told I was being too sensitive when I brought up concerns, or even cried because I had trouble shocking him. And then I was told I was too sensitive
Were there any physical injuries from the shock collar?
Yes, he did have either burn or allergic reaction to the metals. And he's a poodle, and his neck is actually shaped more oval. And so instead of sitting high on the back of the neck where it's supposed to anyway, it would slide down to the front, which is even more sensitive, even more nerves, I now know. So there are so many things that I now know that people are out there not knowing. And that's why I'm here today, because I want people who don't know to know.
So in fact, your dogs are always looking to you for guidance, not control. And I think when people say you have to dominate the dog, it says a lot more about the human than it says about the individual dog.
You're a very big proponent of non-force dog training.
Right.
Can you explain why?
Because if you do forceful dog training, you end up with a dog who learns that everything depends on force. It's like raising a kid by smacking the kid every time. If that's the child's only way of conflict resolution, I would guess that you have a fairly limited repertoire with which to govern your life. Our whole worldview of what dogs do is all confused by the way people have concentrated on conflict resolution and inappropriate conflict resolution. The dogs that I deal with, many of whom are quite aggressive, who resort to aggression as a way of dealing with their social situation, are either pathologically anxious or they're doing it now to survive. I lived with a dog for over a decade who was my patient, and you couldn't move without telling this dog you were going to move, without him grabbing you. Well, he learned that because he was hung from choke chains and beaten, and he learned that humans were completely unreliable. That dog turned out to be the dog that taught me how important it was to understand what dogs were thinking and what a difference it could make to realize that so many of their behaviors are about asking for information. And if all you have is force as a tool, you're giving them information that you're a threat. You will never, ever, ever get that dog to work with you in a trusting relationship. So I see the damage it's done. And for years, all of my patients that ended up euthanized all fell into one group. They were all a group that had been put on a shock collar. I oppose forceful training because it doesn't work, and there are now excellent data to prove it doesn't work, and because I see the damage it does.
What of the behavioral fallouts from the prong collar or shock collars? What have you seen in your travels?
His prong collar was used to take him bodily off of the floor, feet inches off of the floor, before he was slammed to the ground, slammed onto a concrete floor, pinned with a hand over his muzzle, a knee in his chest, and a knee in his throat. And this is what this person thought was acceptable in terms of discipline.
What's your dog's name?
He is Firework.
Nice.
He was found on the 4th of July several years ago, who is a 70-pound Labrador Rottweiler cross who is laying on my feet right now. He has bony protrusions growing in parts of his spine that are related to generally blunt force injury or wrenching and twisting motions. When he was returned by the second adopters that were the heavily abusive prong collar users, appeared to have a soft tissue injury in his neck for upwards of 2 weeks. He is incredibly self-protective about his space. So he's laying on my foot, and normally I would make a small sound before I move, because if he is heavily asleep and something touches him or moves, he responds with an open mouth lunge. He has yet to bite anyone in our home, but this dog is in this home and still alive because I have a 6-foot privacy fence. I have extensive knowledge of volatile dog behavior, as does my husband, who's also a trainer associated with a shelter nearby. We have no children and cannot have children. This dog is dog friendly, which is really my only requirement. But I also help him manage his resource guarding, which I believe comes from further abusive training practices. Without my ability to remove myself and view him as a professional views a dog, not just as my baby, my little buddy, our family companion, this dog at age almost 13 would probably already be dead.
What are the behavioral fallouts that you've seen in the dogs that have been subjected to shock collars and prong collars?
Wow, Bosun here is a prime example. I mean, he's shut down. I've seen a lot of dogs with prong collars, and I find them collars. I call it collar sensitive. Like, I go to touch them and they get reactive and try to bite me.
What have been the reasons that people have given for using shock and prong collars?
Usually control. I find I just find a lot of the dogs that I know have been either had e-collars or prong collars. They're much harder to deal with, me being a stranger to them.
Is there anything that you wanted to add in terms of, just helping people understand why they shouldn't go forward using prong collars and shock collars with their dog?
Well, it usually creates more damage than it fixes. Like, there's usually a reason that they think they need to use them. I see the other side. I see the damage that they cause, especially with Bosun. I mean, he's the most extreme case I've seen of fear. And he's otherwise a totally normal dog, but he doesn't know where the punishment is coming from. With the electric collars, and that's what I think he was abused with, they don't know where it's coming from. Like, when he's walking through that door at super slow speed, he's just terrified. He's waiting for that punishment. He has no idea where it's coming from. And it's going to be hard to reprogram him.
So have you received any bites from him? Have you had any sort of damaging bites?
Like, if you look at those videos, when he's agitated and growling, like, I know almost 100% if I go near him or put my hand near him, I'm going to get a bite. And it's going to be a bite. It's not going to be a little warning. It's going to be a full-on bite. If we can't modify the behavior, it might even mean euthanization for a dog like Bosun, unfortunately.
What do you hear typically as the sales pitch for using choke collars or prong or shock collars?
Well, what I hear from my clients that I see after they use these people is that they were told that it's so important because it gives the dog confidence. It gives the dog confidence because the dog clearly knows what's okay and what's not okay, and then the dog can relax.
What are the fallouts that you've seen from dogs who've been on prong collars and dogs who've been on shock collars? What's the behavioral fallout? What's the physical fallout?
Well, I see a lot of dogs who are shut down, a lot of dogs who are afraid to do anything. I've also seen dogs who have gone after people, just like the dog with the little boy. There's this German Shepherd who has a shock collar, and the Shepherd bit an older woman and then badly hurt the neighborhood kid, took his ear off, because this dog also learned that other people in the, outside cause me pain. So this is what we deal with every day on a daily basis. The dogs are suffering, the dogs are being hurt, and the dogs are feeling like, I just can't say it enough. I have to get you before you get me.
Have you seen dogs who have been more aggressive and more fearful from being shocked?
I had one case where it was a golden retriever. The golden retriever kept jumping up at the 7-year-old kid. The trainer came over and said, anytime he jumps on him, you shock him. Well, what happened? The dog ended up taking a chunk out of his cheek. Why was that? This kid is causing me pain. This kid is causing me terrible pain. I have to get him before he gets me. When all these are put into place, I don't think anybody really stops, sadly, because it's an unregulated field. The people who are inviting this person in are believing that they're hiring a professional who knows what they're talking about.
How much more work is it as a pet dog trainer to go into a situation where a dog has been shocked and choked and they have all this behavioral fallout? How much more work is it to help this dog recover from those things?
The dog feels pain. So then it takes much longer, because now we have to pave that path over the path of fight or flight. The dog is afraid. The dog doesn't know when it might feel this pain.
Aggression begets aggression. So if you train using confrontational, aggressive approaches that for a fleeting moment looks like, you very quickly turn the situation around, but the long-term effect is, building a negative relationship with the dog, increasing aggression down the road, and those techniques are actually training techniques of yesteryear. They should not be applied to dogs today, and especially not dogs who might fight back and not accept really what is a type of abuse.
I had a client about 2 weeks ago, and he looked at me and I thought he was going to start crying. I mean, he said, I'll tell you something. And I'm like, okay. And he said, this is from experience. He goes, my last dog was a behavior euthanization bully at 4 years of age. Oh, I have chills when I tell you the story, because I went to one of these chains and he goes, I should have known better, but they put a shock collar on him. And I don't remember, 6 months or a year later, he was behavior euthanization. I've been training dogs for about 32 years. I'm certified dog trainer, certified behavior consultant.
What do you hear as the typical sales pitch for using prong collars and shock collars?
Oh, it doesn't hurt. It's a TENS unit. It's like tapping you on the shoulder. It just gets their attention. It's not painful at all. So that's what I hear a lot of around here. Yeah, they talk a lot about dominance, which we both know has been debunked. And you've got to be in charge of your dog. Your dog's just trying to control you. And by putting this on, you'll get the control back. Of course, I hear that.
What have you seen in your travels as the fallouts from using shock collars and prong collars?
Well, I've seen everything from dogs that are globally fearful. I've seen aggression. One of the most traumatic cases was a dog that I had that was sent away. I watched her for the client, not a board and train, but just watched her for the weekend. The dog was great with me all weekend, nervous, but as soon as the client returned, I actually put the dog in the room, put up a baby gate, and then told the client to come in to get her dog. And the dog saw her and turned around and tried to attack me. And she said, well, how did you know to put the dog behind the baby gate? And I said, I remember one of my first training sessions 20, 30 years ago when one of my mentors taught me that when you use the shock and the owner is present, the dogs will take that picture. And this dog literally flipped the switch once they saw their guardian and me, and flipped that switch and just would have attacked me if I was not behind the baby gate. They will often never recover from this.
Security and bond with your dog is everything. If they don't trust you, if they don't trust the environment, then obviously something has gone very wrong there, and you need to reevaluate how you're even working with this animal.
Did any of the people at the shelter end up getting bitten?
My goodness, yes. There was a rather severe bite incident with a volunteer. It was a volunteer who also worked with dogs as a trainer. Unfortunately, this particular volunteer, the type of training they were using wasn't necessarily what the shelter was recommending. They were walking past one of the play yards where other dogs were playing inside. Volunteer decided at this point that the best technique to use was to remove the clip from the regular collar, and she basically created a noose loop with the handle of the leash and put that around the dog's neck and tried to yank up on it to get control of the dog as they were walking past. And the dog turned on her and put her in the hospital. She had severe bites to her arm. She was in intensive care for about 2 months. They defend themselves. They feel like, I can't get away. I do not trust the person that's with me to help me handle this situation, or in fact, they are making the situation worse. So I'm going to distance myself not only from the trigger, but from the human who is supposed to be here helping me.
What do you hear typically as the sales pitch for people to use a prong collar or a shock collar?
It's a tool, just like anything else. And, if it's used properly, but just from seeing like social media posts and different trainers on social media where they're using either an e-collar or a prong collar, they'll just say, oh, it doesn't hurt, it's just a tool. But again, in real life, What I've experienced, I've never seen any positive outcomes with it at all. At the time, I had no training background at all. And I just was like, okay, I just kind of just believed what people would tell me. And I just assumed that, bigger dogs require, a prong collar to help, move them around. I had this prong collar. I had no idea how to use it. And, but I just would use it every day, and it would kind of like, she would pull on it. And then one day, our neighbors who had 2 labs, they swore by this trainer, this girl, and they had the prong collars on their labs all the time. And he said this lady was great. So I hired her. It was like, $400 something for like 3 visits. And she came, and I was telling her that my dog Bella was a little bit reactive towards other dogs. So I said, I have the prong collar. Oh, well, you should just use a smaller prong collar. So essentially the same thing, but it was just narrower. I'm like, okay. As I was working with what she was telling me with the prong collar, nothing was working. Like, if anything, it was making her more excited and actually more reactive. When she took the leash from me, and now I'm observing and I'm watching her with my dog with the prong collar, that was it for me. I'm actually getting goosebumps right now just thinking about it. When I saw her, like, that was it. Now at this point, I had no training, very minimal from what I read, but I had no real training. I just knew as a human being, I'm like, this is not right. This is unethical. I didn't need any background in training to understand that this was not okay. And I said immediately, I was in San Diego, but at the time my Jersey in me came out, and I was like, whoa, 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 whoa. I'm like, give me my leash back. I said, give me the leash back. I immediately took that collar off, and I never used it again. And then moving forward after that, that prompted me to then look into all the evidence-based information. And then that's when that started to happen. And I went right to a harness. And then shockingly, my dog became less reactive after I started a whole new thing. But that was it for me. Cause I had used it, I had seen it, I had heard information, but until I actually saw it with my own 2 eyes, somebody else doing it to her, I was like, holy cow. I'm like, never again.
Do any of these pain trainers ever warn their clients about the potential fallouts of shock collars or prong collars?
No, I find that they don't, and I rarely hear them talk at all about fallout. Tend to just tell them all the benefits. And, they don't, whether it is the shock collar, whether it's the e-fence, they don't tell them about what the possibles, I call it fallout or side effects, can be by using those tools.
I think for me, the dividing line between how we're training a dog, what I like to call dog-friendly dog training, and ways which are unacceptable, is if the dog's in pain or if he's scared. I view that both of these things are unnecessary in training. You have to punish in training. You have to let the dog know that was right, that was cool, I'm rewarding you, I want to reinforce that behavior, I want you to do it again. And then we have to punish you in the sense of saying, no, I don't want that type of behavior. That basically punishment should be punishing. It does not have to be painful or fearful. And because it doesn't have to be, I personally think it shouldn't, because it means it's actually trainer's choice whether they decide to make their punishment painful or fearful. My dividing line is not with the whole issue of whether or not we punish. It's what is the nature of the punishment. And I don't think we should hurt the dog in training, and I don't think we should make him afraid.
Did the people who sold you the electronic collars have any sort of warning or any sort of caveats, like if you use this, there may be these types of behavioral fallouts?
No, not at all. Not at all.
How long did it take for your dogs to obtain an aversive or negative association to the beeps?
3 trips to the fence.
And that's just in the first day?
In the first day, in the first training session, yes.
How many minutes was that, roughly?
Less than 5.
So in
less than 5.
In less than 5 minutes, your dogs were sensitized to beeps?
Yes.
Wow.
And that was without even the shock. And that really should have been my first clue that this wasn't going to be a successful situation, but I was clueless.
The first day you did under 5 minutes of just having the beeps and the dogs were afraid. And then the next week they came back and applied the shock. And then what happened?
So they applied the shock. We couldn't get the dogs to even go towards the fence to get the shock while we were involved. So we couldn't walk our dogs towards the edge of the barrier at all with the shock portion on. And the fence people wouldn't leave until we did. So we basically had to drag our dogs to the edge of the fence. I know. To the edge of the fence for them to get shocked and then go away from the fence and give them rewards. Right. Right. If I knew then what I know now, or the information they're given is either false or ignorant of the actual impact to the dog's behavior, to their mental health.
So what has been the fallouts after using these shock collars? What's the behavioral fallouts for your dog?
So we stopped using these shock collars within 4 months. It has been 5 years now since that time. And our small dog, the one that was already averse that got the shock collar increased, he is so afraid of beeping, the beeping tone that is in nearly every electronic piece of equipment in our house. He has now become averse to me cooking because the cooking equipment has this beepy tone. My husband in the basement has a server, a computer server that occasionally beeps. The beeping caused our dog to cower and shake, like huddle next to the closest human he could get to. And again, the battery backup has a clicky noise that happened before the beeping started. So now he associates that clicking noise. So I'm now having to train beeps, to neutralize beeps, to neutralize the clicky noise.
People are trying to sell somebody on a shock collar or a prong collar. What is the sales pitch?
They use a lot of the same language, and it's very destructive. And personally, I think it could be these companies that make them and sell them could be sued for false advertising because they say things like, it doesn't hurt, it's only a tap. They actually say e-collar, and they want to say e-collars and not shock collars. That's important. Reframe the language of it in selling this tool and making a lot of money doing it. They say that just a tap, e-collars do not cause pain, when all of the science says they cause pain, they cause stress in dogs. They're not a guarantee of freedom. They say that a lot. My dog deserves freedom. Freedom from what? Freedom where? To be hit by a car? Because I know trainers who have their dogs have been killed on a shock collar because they believed it was 100% guarantee. Trainers have lost their dogs because they're zapping the dog as it runs into traffic. I'm Annie Phoenix, and I have worked with dogs, lived with dogs my whole life. I became a professional trainer in 25 plus years ago. I'm the author of 2 best-selling canine behavior books, and I specialize in aggressive dogs and reactive dogs and dogs who have a bite history. And I have done that for 25 years. I teach what causes trauma in dogs and how to heal dogs. It boggles the mind that these things are legal. They should never have been legal. It comes from military and sport dog training. That's not a family pet.
How much more work does it take to go in and help a family that has a dog who's been harmed by shock collars and prong collars?
It could take years. It could take months. It's not a week. You're not going to fix it in a week. Sometimes we can't help them. They're so far shattered. They're mentally shattered and emotionally shattered. Dogs have emotions that we can't help them. It's hard to bring somebody back from torture.
How much more work has to go into a dog training session when the dog has overly generalized fear or aggression?
Flat. From my perspective, personally, as a trainer, I would say probably 3/4 of the work I do is my anxiety and fear program. So it's not even about a session, but it's about programming, and it's about long, extended periods of time. Again, a lot of these behaviors were established over time. Then they bring in the aversive tools. It just compounds the problem, and there's a lot of unwinding. You're trying to transfer the dog from anxiety and fear to a state of calm and confidence. And even with humans, that can take quite a while. And so it's a lot of work. It's really trying to get buy-in from the clients. You're trying to talk them away from feeling guilty. Sometimes you have to even sell them on the fact that I get a lot of them come along and, we went to a board and train and they gave us the shock collar. We really didn't like that. So we turn around and use the prong on walks, but now our dog is acting out and now you need to come. And a lot of times, from my perspective, I always term it as I got to put Humpty Dumpty back together, because now this poor dog is a mess or a wreck. And so it's not even about a single session. Sometimes it requires medications. Medications become a tool in the toolbox to help us establish that reliable level of calm, myself and the client. So that's in that calm state of mind is where the behavior modification occurs. And then the hope is you can unwind the meds down the road. It will affect every aspect of the dog. I mean, there's no doubt about it. And so I've seen that last a very long time. Maintenance is the best move we got here. We just can't get through where the level of damage has been done. Has there been discussions of behavioral euthanasia? Absolutely.
I think this sort of phobia we have of rewards, that somehow rewarding animals is somehow corrupting them. That it's much, much better, that it's somehow good for animals, it's good for children, it's good for everybody to kind of have bad things happen to you. And that in fact, if you reward behavior, then somehow you're softening somebody up, you're destroying their character, you're somehow having them do it for less noble reasons. I mean, and from a behavior modification standpoint, this is catastrophic. Because basically you're handcuffing yourself from competent execution of any basic training or behavior modification. And so where dogs end up sort of the victims of this mentality that we don't need to motivate them, they are born with this innate motivation. And so if some individual dog does not innately just want to do what you ask him to do, that particular animal is defective and therefore has a comeuppance coming to him, which is really, really, if you think about it, just Orwellian. I mean, to sort of say, well, we don't really need to motivate the animal, and then end up, of course, forcing them, which is another brand of motivation. Properly functioning living organisms do not do anything for nothing. There is no free lunch in behavior. There's no free lunch in behavior modification. Whenever the gloves come off and you actually have to modify behavior, out come the motivators. Anytime when the chips are down and we actually do have to change behavior, out come the real motivators. We do have to do that. It's only kind of in the popular dog sort of sphere where this myth keeps floating around that somehow dogs are just automatically going to do things. But I've got news for you. Dogs are properly functioning living organisms like all other animals, and they will not do something for nothing. The question then becomes, do you want to do it with force, or do you want to do it with rewards? And people then vote with their feet. Those who are opting to motivate with force are not owning it. They're not saying that they're motivating with force. They're cloaking it in euphemism. They're cloaking it in all kinds of woo language, which really retards any kind of intelligent discussion about, okay, so how shall we motivate dogs? I mean, it is currently still legal to do all kinds of things to dogs that it was actually, 20, 30 years ago, legal to do to children. And the way society is progressing, I mean, eventually some of this stuff will be illegal. But for the time being, anything goes. And so consumers need to be really careful about assessing how dog trainers motivate dogs. And they should run, not walk, from anybody who doesn't speak frankly about the way they're going to motivate the animal. So in other words, to be a good consumer, you need to quiz any dog trainer and say, how are you planning to motivate my dog? And if you don't get a straight answer, I'm going to force your dog, I'm going to frighten your dog, I'm going to scare your dog, I'm going to reward your dog with food, I'm going to reward your dog with toys and games, etc. If you get anything that sounds the slightest bit sort of dodgy, then I would say run, don't walk. It's just basically a trainer who's advertising incompetence.
So your message to the New Jersey legislature would be to absolutely ban these tools in pet dog training?
Oh, I would say that overall, the United States is a country of wonderful people. Empathetic, kind, loving, especially when it comes towards animals. Our progress on animal rights and treatment of, ethical and humane treatment of animals has improved so much in the past 50 years. So why is it that we are so far behind the curve on these very, very unethical tools? And yet when it comes to our beloved family members and pets, why are we doing so much damage and creating dangerous situations for animals and their humans? Why are we allowing this to happen when it's so unnecessary?
What would you like to say to the legislature of New Jersey? What would you like them to know, and why should they pass this bill?
As an elected official, your charge by virtue of your office is to not only represent the people, but to provide for the safety and tranquility of the general public at large. So your charge would be to create the best environment, in this case for dog training, that is going to ensure the tranquility and the safest situation, not only for the dog and their immediate family, but the general public, who can also very well be affected by a dog who's acting out because of use of these aversive tools. So I would say, based on just by virtue of what your position requires, you should be passing this legislation.
We're going to see more bites from dogs who are subjected to things like continuous aversive training methods. Outside of concern for the dog's welfare, which I think is just as pressing, it's a public health concern because we can see more bites. And I don't think anybody wants that. I think it's also a step in the right direction, kind of as a culture, to move towards a less violent approach to the companion animals that we've chosen to share our lives with.
What would you like the legislature in New Jersey to know about passing this bill to ban shock collars and prong collars in pet dog training?
I would like the legislature to know that dogs don't have lobbyists. Politicians know lobbyists. They know lawyers. They know people who have representation and people who don't. Dogs have no representation other than people like you, people who are willing to speak out. So these legislators are in unique positions to step up for an animal that has no lobbyists, no lawyers, and do the right thing, do the moral thing, and do the ethical thing, and that is to ban them.